Welcome everyone to the TPA T5 webinar for this month. This is Texas Space Authority's third Thursday at 2 training series, which we try to have every month or every other month to cover topics that are timely and informative to PACE stakeholders across the state. And today we're going to cover new hot off the press underwriting and technical standards updates from Keeping Pace in Texas, which is the policymaking organization that supports the PACE industry in the state of Texas, and go through some examples of how these changes are going to impact projects, look at a tool to help quantify savings and costs, and then wrap it up with some Q&A. So I'm joined today, thankfully, by my colleague, Jonathon Blackburn. Jonathon's an engineer in Texas, technical advisor to TPA, and he's going to do a walkthrough of the ITPR calculator when we get to that point in the webinar. Today, we're going to cover some of the new changes, including the updated loan-to-value ratio, savings to investment calculation changes, and then the principal payment schedule that all went into effect on last Friday, actually, published Valentine's Day by Keeping Pace in Texas. So for today's webinar, everyone is muted and the video is disabled. So please use the Q&A section of the webinar, and we will track those questions that come along throughout the webinar and make sure that we're addressing those, and you'll have a chance to have some feedback by the end of the discussion today. If you're attending today, afterwards, you'll receive a survey asking how we can do better. What did we cover? What did we not? That sort of thing. You'll also get a copy of these slides with the links embedded, so no need to take screenshots or write things down. You'll get a copy of all the slides. And then also, if you are a professional and are looking for professional development hours, you can request a certificate, and we'll provide that for attending today. And then we'll also post the entire webinar on our website and YouTube channel afterwards. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to attend live today, they'll have a chance to review the resources and the materials afterwards. So the agenda today is pretty brief. Looking at the attendees, I see some familiar faces and names, and I see some folks that I think are probably new to PACE. So we're going to spend just a bit of time at the front end on what is PACE exactly and how's it working to date. Then we'll jump into really kind of the meat of today's webinar, the underwriting and technical standards updates, and then again conclude with some resources and references and Q&A opportunity. All right, so why PACE? This is the problem that PACE was really designed to help address, and that is that property owners know that they can save money over the long run by making investments in energy and water efficient technologies in their properties. But these things have pretty high price tags and often get sort of pushed to the end of the line when it comes to where property owners are expending their own capital. They're trying to make payroll, have other priorities. Typically, improvements to mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are not the priority, so they're left unaddressed. And this results in equipment failures at exactly the wrong time. In the summer, that's when chillers go down. On cold days like this in the winter, that's when heating systems go down. And so you wind up replacing this equipment on really a piecemeal basis, and it's not fully optimized for the building. So it's costing more to operate than necessary, and it costs more than necessary to replace. In the case of new construction, the things behind the walls are what get targeted when push comes to shove on construction budgets. So you might have a beautiful facade on the front with inefficient systems in the mechanical room. Just sort of the way that things happen. Those decisions at the front end then go on to haunt the operating costs of the building for its life cycle. So that's a challenge as well. And then increasingly these days, we're seeing projects, particularly new construction, where the gaps in the project capital stacks are larger and increasing. Senior debt on properties where maybe it used to be 70–80% potentially is now in the 50 to 60% range. Owners wanting to preserve equity are looking for ways to fill that capital gap. and allocating the eligible items in the project to PACE is a good way to do that. So we're seeing that increasingly used in the last few years. So solution to all this, PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, is what PACE stands for. So this is a financing structure that can provide 100% funding for certain energy efficiency, water conservation, and distributed generation projects. It's private financing. It's secured through a local property assessment as a security. And we like to say it's like a single parcel PID. So if you're familiar with a property improvement district, it's like that, but it's parcel by parcel. PACE is authorized under state law, a statute that passed more than a decade ago, now in Texas Government Code Chapter 399, which sets up a process for local governments to create a PACE region and then operate a PACE program in accordance with the statute. This is a voluntary and open market program, meaning that any local government can opt in, any contractor can do the work, any property owner can access it once the program's created. Any lender can provide the financing. So there's not a prescribed list at all. It's simply a structure that enables these types of transactions. The types of properties that are eligible, anything that's commercial, so 4 units or more residential qualifies as, or 5 units or more residential qualifies as commercial. Nonprofits, industrial manufacturing, agricultural, all eligible types of properties. I mentioned that this is an opt-in program, so we now have Texas PACE Authority serves 104 cities and counties across the state. This map where you see the shaded county, that's the entire county has PACE. Where there's a star, it means the city has adopted at the city level. And this covers the majority of the state's population. Our role in all of this is a governmental function, really, kind of above the line in this illustration. So cities and counties create the program, but they don't want to create a department to run it. So how can they administer it? That's where we come in. Our organization, Texas PACE Authority, which is a public service nonprofit, was created to provide that outsourced PACE administration service for multiple cities and counties. So that's all we do. We represent the counties and ensure that the transactions comply with statute, guidelines, et cetera. What's below the line is really a private transaction. So property owners identify projects, working with engineers and service providers. They scope the project, they identify a capital provider, they put the deal together, and then they propose it to the PACE program. So different functions. We jokingly say, we referee the transactions on behalf of the cities and counties. So that's really our role. PACE can be used in a number of ways. So originally envisioned for retrofitting older facilities, we're certainly seeing that. We're also seeing it used in repurposing projects where maybe a warehouse or an office building is now turned into something different. And as part of that renovation, it needs all new replacements of mechanical systems, electrical, plumbing, building insulation, et cetera. On-site generation, energy storage, which we're seeing a lot of these days, also eligible, as long as it's behind the meter, customer side of the meter. In the case of new construction, if you are going at least 5% higher than the local applicable energy codes, then you can use PACE to finance the cost of all of those measures that take you above code. And then refinancing. We hear a lot of times from owners who say, I've just done this project. I think it has some things that are PACE eligible, but I didn't know about it at the time. Can we use this to refinance? And the answer is yes, if it's within 24 months of the installation of the last PACE eligible improvement. So those are the predominant uses we see of PACE in Texas. So the property owners, how do they benefit? Well, essentially, this allows them to pay for upgrades today using tomorrow's savings. That's really the key to this. And unlike a conventional equipment loan, which is illustrated in the bottom left, that has a pretty short repayment term, typically no longer than 5 years, that results in a scenario that's really cash flow negative for the owner. So all of the repayment happens in the first fraction of the improvement's life, and during that time, the payments and costs are higher than the benefits. PACE allows that same project to be amortized over a much longer term. So the repayments are less than or equal to the savings, and so the owner and the property benefit from day one and throughout the life of the loan. So how is this all working? We have seen in Texas projects we've administered over 100, now totaling over $500 million. Urban and rural, all types of end uses, manufacturing, mixed use, hospitality, all types of projects, energy efficiency, water conservation, demand reduction. And then the smallest project, less than 100,000, the largest project, almost 50 million. So a very wide range of uses and all types of ownership. A couple of examples, very first PACE project in the state. This is a temple in Austin that needed HVAC replacements, but they didn't have the available capital, and congregations are cash flow challenged. And so in this case, they used PACE to finance HVAC, building control systems, window film to reduce solar heat gain. They accessed utility dollars, and this all made sense. Another example of repurposing, Deep Ellum area of Dallas, an old warehouse was fully renovated, everything done to it, exterior glazing roof, solar panels on the top, elevators. The assessment total was $5 million and very significant utility savings. In Amarillo, up in the Panhandle, this building in the background during construction was abandoned for many years, an eyesore for the community. They were actually raising money to raise it, to have it torn down, but a developer purchased it, turned it into what's now known as the Barfield Hotel. If you're ever in Amarillo, that's where you need to stay. It's a beautiful property, nicest property between Fort Worth and Santa Fe, probably. They also secured historic tax credit as part of that capital stack for the project, and very significant savings and improvements inside for the folks who are staying there. San Antonio Intercontinental Hotel, as it's now known, downtown. It's been several hotels before, top to bottom renovation. Beautiful property now. Really was a great location on the Riverwalk, northern side of town, but it needed everything. And here they accessed PACE for $28 million of the overall renovations. And finally, I believe this is an illustration of PACE being used for new construction. These are apartment homes that were built post Hurricane Harvey, just outside of Rockport, and they went above code, which means that the tenants who were renting had lower utility bills, but also as part of that improvement, there's some inherent resiliency benefits with better building envelope, walls insulation, gives ride-through capability in the case of power outages caused by future storms. And they've actually done this now on 2 phases. I think there's a 3rd phase as well. We have a testimonial from the developer on our website there under the YouTube link, which is good to listen to. Okay, so if you have been checking email to this point, now's the time to sort of stand up and pay attention. This is why you came today. We're going to cover underwriting and technical standards and changes that have recently been made and how they affect PACE projects. So a little background on the structure of really PACE governance in the state. And as a former state official for almost 30 years, I'm very familiar with the left side and how statutes are generally put into place. The legislature has the unique authority to develop laws and pass them. So in this case, a group called Keeping PACE in Texas at the bottom, which is an advocacy group and a lobbying group, put together a proposal for the legislature to consider, again, more than 10 years ago, to create commercial PACE throughout the state. So this statute was passed almost unanimously in both the House and the Senate. The bill was passed, rather. Then Governor Rick Perry signed it into law, so it took effect immediately. Well, that's great. Okay, the laws are by design, very general. You don't want to be too prescriptive in a bill that passes the legislature and the resulting law, because if you get something wrong, then you have to come back 2 years later when the legislature convenes again to fix it. So things are left deliberately general. And normally the process is that typically an agency is assigned rulemaking authority to put more specifics around that law. Well, with the Texas PACE Act, local governments were given the authority to create local PACE programs, but that was it. So there was no specifics. This could have resulted in thinking about the number of counties and cities in the state, 254 counties, 1,100 cities. There could have been that many interpretations of how to operationalize PACE at the local level, which would have been chaos. So into that void, the Keeping Pace in Texas group put together a team of stakeholders, a couple of hundred in number, representing property owners, PACE lenders, banks, contractors, you name it, and put together what's called PACE in a box. So these are uniform standards that can simply be adopted plug and play at the city or county level. So cities and counties don't have to do that work individually, and so that there'll be more uniformity throughout the state. I've heard PACE in a box referred to as best practices. That is not accurate. The PACE in a box standards are based on best practices, and they are derived from experience around the country with different PACE programs, as well as operationally in Texas. But they are standards based on best practices, but they are the standards. So then a level of detail beyond that is at the program administration level. We developed a program guide, and that really operationalizes, again, these guidelines. So that's really the flow, probably more background on legislation and how it gets implemented than you came to hear today, but that's the process. So by design, Keeping Pace in Texas regularly reviews its standards, and when necessary, makes updates. So that has happened recently. And in the underwriting standards, there are 3 sections that were updated. These are all linked at the bottom. You can see all of this. It's all publicly available. And the 3 areas we're going to cover today that were updated are loan to value, the savings to investment ratio calculations that have changed, and then also the length of time before principal payments are required on PACE loans and PACE assessments. So we'll go into each of these in a little more detail. So first of all, the appropriate loan to assessed value ratio. And 2 things to point out here. This is a little bit in the weeds, but there are 2 acronyms or abbreviations here, LTAV and LTV. So in the PACE statute, the basis for the loan to value is the assessed value of the property. So that is the assessed value according to the local central appraisal district for tax purposes. So by default, that is the assessed value. So when you see loan to assessed value ratio, that's what we're talking about. So the changes increased the PACE loan to assessed value cap, which had been 25%, to 35%. And again, that's the CAD, or the Central Appraisal District assessed value. So a PACE loan now can be for as much as 35% of the CAD assessed value. There is a variance option that allows, instead of the CAD assessed value, an independent appraisal to be used to establish that limit. And so in those cases, again, the LTV, the loan to appraised value, not assessed value, is capped at 35%. So just a clarification there. So 35% is the cap. It was 25. That means more capital is available for projects, bottom line. The next update is on the savings to investment ratio. So in the statute, again, to ensure that property owners are benefiting from the savings from these projects and that there are sufficient savings for owners to have headroom to repay and service debt, this idea of savings to investment was put into place. So the changes here, this maintains the savings to investment ratio. of 1 or greater. And this is on a project basis versus a measure basis. So each individual component, say a lighting component or an HVAC component, does not independently have to meet a savings to investment ratio greater than 1, but in aggregate, the project does. That part's unchanged. The key to this is it removed, sorry about that. It removes the interest costs from the SIR calculation. So to date, the PNI had been used in the cost side of the equation, and now going forward, it's just the principal. It also establishes that there's no variance for SIR. There were some pathways and kind of some gray areas before, which created confusion. So with more headroom now, both in the 35% LTV and not having the interest in the calculation, that frees up considerable capital opportunity for these projects. So there is no SIR variance going forward. The next guidance change is when principal has to be repaid. And so the standards here are that capitalized interest or interest-only payments on the project, on projects with construction, that you have 24 months that during construction where either capitalized interest or interest only can be paid. That can have an additional year depending on the complexity of the construction, if it's documented as such, and then an additional 24 months, up to 24 months for a property to stabilize post-construction. So in total, maximum of 5 years prior to a required payment of principal. That allows the project to stabilize before full revenue from it is being realized by the owners. An exception to the 5 years is that in refinance, where the construction is complete, so there is no construction period. And in that case, the principal payments have to commence within 36 months to be eligible. So those are the changes there. So these are all reflected in our program guide. I mentioned this earlier. We've just updated this, version 4.2, just published, lays out the process itself. This is on our website. So a few changes, not a lot, but conforming changes to the Keeping Pace in Texas guidance. That's on our website now. And a little walkthrough of how these impact an actual project. So the assumption here is this is a $1 million valuation post-construction of the asset value. The savings, projected savings from the project, $20,000, 20-year term, 8% interest. That's the base case. So if you take that and apply that to the old standards, which was 25% LTV and interest included, and you sort of follow the chart. So the total savings, 20 years, $20,000, $400,000 of savings total. Total principal, $250,000, again, capped out at 25% LTV. The total interest payments over that 20-year term would be $251,000. So the total cost, including P&I, would be $501,864. And if you do the SIR calculation on that, you don't get 1, you're at 0.80. And so that project under the old standards does not qualify. With the new standards, assuming still just 25% LTV for comparative purposes, here, again, total savings 400, total principal 250, interest is not included in the calculation. So the total cost is 250 for an SIR of 1.6. So it does clear anything above 1. If you take that to the next step and say, let's use the up to 35% LTV, you now have a $350,000 potential project. Again, the savings 400, principal 350, total cost 350, and it still clears the SIR of 1.14. So the impact of all of these changes are that significant more capital is available for these projects if required. So this can, again, either address more of a need that's there in a retrofit scenario. If there is a significant gap in the capital stack that needs to be addressed in some way, PACE could be a bigger part of that. So all of these are evolutions of the standards given the track record of $500 million or more projects and excellent performance on those. So more capital available through PACE with the implementation of these new standards. On the technical side, the technical standards manual that Keeping Pace in Texas publishes has also been updated with conforming changes. That's available on the website as well. And then something that if you are on the engineering or technical side, we hope you're familiar with, is the ITPR workbook. This is a spreadsheet that allows uniform and more simplified calculations of SIR, LTV, et cetera. That's also on the website. And this is the point today where I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, and he is going to do a quick walkthrough of the ITPR workbook so you're more familiar with that. Jonathan?
Right. Can you confirm you can hear me and you can see my screen?
I can hear you and can see the screen. Yes.
Right. Hey, everybody. Jonathon Blackburn. I'm going to give a quick walkthrough of the ITPR workbook. Just as a recap, under the statute, all PACE projects in Texas have to submit as part of their process a financial analysis of the savings that are going to result from the project. And so what we've tried to do is to streamline that process to help out our engineers and making that a little bit easier, as well as to make it really clear when you submit to the administrator, what does your project look like? And we do that through this tool, which we've termed the ITPR workbook. Now, based on these new underwriting standards, we've undergone some pretty significant revisions to the workbook and to the process of calculating the SIR, the savings to investment ratio. And I'm going to walk through those live right now. So this is the new version of the workbook. It is posted on the Keeping Pace in Texas website, so you can download it from there, or reach out and we can send you a copy. You remember, the main output we're looking for is we want to input the characteristics of our project, and the main output we're looking for is ultimately the savings to investment ratio. So we've created this worksheet. I'll walk through it kind of section by section, and I'll point out the big changes that we've made. The first thing that we ask you to do, or really in this case, what we do is we ask our ITPRs to fill out this workbook, ITPR being the independent third-party reviewers. These are the engineers that will look at the energy and financial savings analysis and check it that it has indeed been performed according to generally accepted engineering standards. That is a requirement also in the Texas PACE statute. It is a state part of the state law that all projects have to undergo an independent third-party review. So the first thing that we would ask is that there's a project overview section where you just give us some basic info on the project. Where is it located? Who are the folks involved, the ITPR, as well as the developer. A little bit of info about the loan. Specifically, we need the interest rate and the term on the loan, as well as another key metric is what is the value of the property. Scroll down. The next thing we need is, what is the project? PACE is very specific as to what types of energy and water efficiency measures are eligible. So we ask you to give us, what are those measures? In this case, this is a sample project. You can see this is pretty much a holistic retrofit. Roofs, HVAC, lighting, and energy management and electrical systems as well. So, this would be an example of a, kind of holistic building retrofit. We're asking for, what are those measures? And individually, how much energy and water will those measures save? So you can see in this case, we have line items for the electricity savings, If you had solar, you could input, what are you producing? In this case, you can see that this project also has some natural gas savings. These are just various categories for the things that these specific systems will save. Before going on, it's worth noting that under the SIR calculation, there are two methods that a project could potentially use. The first one is for a rehab of an existing building where you have systems that are in place that you're replacing with more efficient systems. In that case, we use what's called a full cost methodology, where the full cost of the replacement system is included in SIR. We do have a little more less widely used method, which is available for projects that are new construction. So new construction is allowed under Texas law on lots that have previously been developed. And that is, again, a requirement in the statute that undeveloped lots are not eligible for PACE. But if it is a project that is new construction, so maybe like a tear down rebuild on a previously developed lot, that new building, the way you demonstrate energy and water savings is that your standard or your baseline would be what is the building code in that area. And the way you would demonstrate energy or water savings to make it eligible for PACE is you would have to actually go above the code requirements. And so if your project is in that situation, you're able to use an incremental cost method where we're considering not just the incremental savings from your project, but the incremental cost of that project. And that's the cost of the project compared to what the code minimum project would look like. So we're comparing incremental cost versus the incremental savings. And if that's the type of project you have, you just select the other drop-down box. All right, so moving on, once we've collected how much is your system going to save you, the next thing you've got to know is what is your utility rate. So in this case, this project had a utility rate of almost 9 cents kilowatt hour. That's their electric rate, as well as, since they had natural gas savings, they also need to know their natural gas utility rate. The next section is we want to translate those kilowatt hour savings into dollars, right? So what we need to know is how much is your project going to cost? So you would give us the cost for each of your measures. One thing I would point out, we also ask that you include your transaction cost for the project. So if you had, some lender cost or an origination fee or other costs that are associated with the transaction, to include those. And finally, we want to get to the number that is actually being financed. This is the amount of the PACE loan. So in this case, you can see we had a $1 million project. It had $25,000 worth of transactions cost, and the total PACE loan was $1,025,000. So that's kind of the cost side of the equation. What the spreadsheet will do is it will then take the savings that you had earlier compared with your utility rates, and will project out over the term of the project, including the lifetime of each individual measure, as well as the term of the loan. How much will that project save in energy and water over the term? And we also include operational savings if they exist. So that's the info that you would need to input to get an analysis, and then I'll really quick walk through what does that mean for the results. Besides energy and water savings, we do also allow other categories of savings if the project does produce other types of savings, and the ones we see most often are we've listed out kind of the 4 types that are the most common. One, because PACE is generally, people treat PACE as a loan, they will deduct the interest, and that does have a tax benefit, a tax savings associated with it. Same with depreciation. This is depreciable equipment, which does translate into a reduced tax bill, and so you can't count those tax savings. Some projects may have tax credits as well, and you can see in this case this one did not, but some of them will. You're able to include that. And then finally, we allow an avoided cost of capital line item as well. This is where if your PACE financing is lower cost than what your alternative method of financing would be, whether it's a mezzanine loan or something like that, then the difference between what you would have paid on the other loan versus PACE is included as savings. And so what we've done is we take the principal of the loan just for no longer really relevant, but just for interest sake. You can see how much you would have paid in interest over the life of the loan. But really, let's look at what happens. What's the output of the analysis? And so we have a box that shows, well, this is breaks down the savings by category. These were the various savings categories we had, and on the right is how much they were worth, as well as a percentage. It's worth noting that there is a requirement that if there are financial savings, that avoided cost of capital, that needs to be less than half of your overall savings bucket. So in this case, you can see it is less than 50%. So that one is fine. And then finally, maybe probably the most important output is the savings to investment ratio, the SIR. And the biggest update is the new SIR guidelines have removed interest from that calculation. So this final box is really the end result. You can see we had 3.2 million in savings. That lines up with what we had inputted in the sheet. And then on the investment side, instead of including the full principal and interest, which is kind of this first box that includes the full principal and interest, the SIR calculation now only includes that principal amount, the amount that you actually funded. And so you can see just that change alone has a pretty substantial impact on the SIR. It should allow for quite a bit more, as Dub said, capital to be available for projects. So that, I believe, takes care of the walkthrough of the spreadsheet. Dub, I will hand it back to you unless we have any other questions.
Yeah, Jonathan, just real quick, you mentioned, and this is even called the ITPR workbook, and we asked the ITPRs to use it. At the front end of projects, can this also be used? This could also be used really for scenario planning, couldn't it? Where you've got different known variables about the project and you're trying to maybe hit an SIR or something, and you could kind of tailor the options around fitting within PACE eligibility.
Yeah, very much so. As long as you have a general idea of what your project will cost and what the measures will save, this could be a very pretty straightforward way of doing that.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
One thing I would also it's probably worth mentioning. This spreadsheet would probably work for, I would say, the vast majority of projects, but every now and then we will go to a project that has some unusual characteristic that requires maybe some more specific modeling or some specific feedback on how to model. If you do have one of those, you're welcome to reach out, and we can figure out a way to appropriately model your project under the standards.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. And yeah, for most commercial projects, commercial real estate projects, this will fit. We did have a project last year that was a manufacturing project where this wasn't as directly applicable, and scenarios like that, again, we'll kind of work one-on-one to figure out a way to quantify impacts and determine PACE eligibility. All right. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to go back here and wrap things up. So again, that workbook is available here on the Keeping Pace in Texas website. A few things to close with in terms of resources, and then I saw at least a couple of questions come in. So we've talked about all of this, and there is a huge untapped PACE opportunity in the state. So the work we've done thus far has totaled about $500 million in closings. And this is kind of a busy chart, but let me kind of walk you through it. The Department of Energy several years ago released what's called their CPACE market assessment tool. And this analysis can be run using that tool for any city or county, I believe over 100,000. And we ran this scenario for all of the jurisdictions we serve in the state of Texas, and it totaled up to about 187,000 buildings, 4.4 billion square feet. And of the projects that qualified that met the SIR greater than one, there's $15 billion in projects, project total that hit that SIR greater than one standard. So we've done $500 million. So we've tapped about 4% or so of that opportunity. So there's a huge opportunity out there still. And then the savings to the owners is even greater. And because of limitations with the data sets that DOE had, this does not include healthcare facilities, multifamily, which is very significant, industrial, which is very significant, and agricultural as well. So again, we made great progress, but we've really barely scratched the surface. And these changes made at the policy level should open PACE up to even more of these opportunities. So you can find everything that I've covered and more on our website. We try to make it as intuitive as possible, constantly improving that based on user feedback. A lot of drop-down menus with a lot of this information. The program guide that I showed you earlier, as well as a link to the KBT technical standards, are there. The projects that I showed earlier, plus many others, are profiled in case studies on the website. We have a service provider directory. So if you are a contractor, independent third-party reviewer, and you want to engage in PACE, we can list you there. As an extension of the local government, we can't make recommendations, but we can informationally provide this information to those that are interested. So we can list you there. If you are a lender, there's a process where we will do a vetting to ensure that lenders meet certain standards, and they are listed there as well, divided into different categories. So service providers that can support projects in Texas on PACE are all listed there. And then events like this and other training opportunities we have listed there as well. So some of the things you'll find on TBA's website. So questions, there's my email directly. You're always welcome to shoot me an email if you've got a question. Same with Jonathan. And I'm going to take a look here at some questions that came in. I'll just leave this up and let's see. Okay. So one question, on the appraisal side, we talked about the LTV and that being based on either the CAD assessed value or the independent appraisal value. And the question is the appraisal still based off of as complete value? And the answer is yes. So not necessarily the value of the land, or say it's a repurposing project, kind of the residual value of the structures of the assets today, but the forecast appraised value as complete is the basis there. And then another question, let's see, if someone has specific questions about the changes to the application, who should they contact? You can start with me. That's my email, and we can route you to the right person on our team. Teresa Smith heads up all of our transactions. So if it is a transaction-related question, you'll probably be talking to Teresa. If it's a technical question, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, that sort of doesn't fit into kind of the standard analysis, he may be who you wind up talking to. But you can always start with me, and we can make sure that we either answer your question or get you to the right person. Well, with that, I'm seeing no more questions. So we're a little bit early ending today for the hour block that we'd allocated. Thanks for your time. and we look forward to working with you. And if questions arise on any of this, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for joining us. If you're in Texas or anywhere else, stay warm today. It's cold enough in Texas. I know it's colder in other spots. So we will see you at the next webinar. And again, reach out with any questions. Thank you now.